So greasing the wheels. So that's a little bit sexing up what internal tools is, but it actually makes a lot of sense because that's the whole purpose of internal tools is to make our businesses run more effectively. The team that I work on is the marketplace operations team, which is a little bit different than the more DevOps, DevTools thing we've been talking about so far. I'm going to try to talk a little bit on behalf of the DevTools team at Etsy. They do some really great work. They've open sourced a bunch of projects that I'll talk briefly about, but I'll also talk about some of the non-engineering stuff, which is still relevant to this crowd. So internal tools. We're going to talk a little bit about what internal tools are, look a little bit at the landscape of how internal tools are integrated into your organization. We're going to talk a little bit about what Finn said, when you should invest the time and money into a particular tool and when you should try to build your own. And we're also going to talk a little bit about some good things to keep in mind when you do actually bite the bullet and decide to build your own. So when you think about internal tools, you might think about some of the things we talked about so far, but you also might think about some of these guys. So Jira, I think you'd probably consider that an internal tool that helps us really, it definitely greases the wheels. It helps us get our projects done. It helps us handle bugs. GitHub or just Git is really pivotal for us actually getting our work done. If you're more sales-oriented, Salesforce is probably going to be an internal tool that you use a lot, depending on what your business model is. Google Apps, maybe not quite as obvious, but a lot of us use Google Apps for doing our email, and it's a really low barrier to entry to getting some of these things like document sharing and getting those things into our organizations. So it's a really good way, especially for a really small startup, to really reduce the barrier to entry to getting your company moving. Another thing that's another favorite internal tool that you might not think of as an internal tool is Excel. So that's something that the business side of the house really reaches for when they need to do something they don't have engineering resources available to them. But that's an internal tool. That's something that they use to do their jobs. And actually, if you compare it to just opening up a text document, it's a lot more effective. It's a great tool for them to get their jobs done. Tools, they help us, they make our job easier. They're all about productivity. It's all about trying to take something that you could do yourself. I could go into this, I think this is a salt silo. I could go in there and take the salt myself and carry it out to the street and put it on the sidewalk, but this makes it a lot easier. So tools take things that we can already do and we make it a lot easier. This is something else that's, you could probably do manually. I didn't use Etsy.com here because I didn't want to make it seem like this is how Etsy deploys code. But yeah, so okay, I want to deploy code. Let's say I'm doing it like this on the command line. I'm rsyncing some files onto a server and restarting memcache for some reason. And that's how I'm deploying code. And I say, I've been doing this a lot, and I'm ready for continuous deployment. So I'm going to write this script, and this is my internal tool. But really, this is an internal tool. It's a way that you can make your job a lot easier. Something else is kind of similar. This is more akin to the Excel solution. Okay, my marketing team wants some reports. So, okay, they asked me to write this SQL up enough times. I say, you know what? I'm just going to wrap this up in a little command line script that I can run anytime they ask me to run this report, and I can just run this thing. And there you go. They got an email. I don't know. Everybody can read this, right? Most people here probably speak Bash speak, but yeah. So simple solutions to simple problems. Okay, a little bit more complex here. This is more in the DevOps world. You want to make your life a little bit easier when you're writing code. You figure, I run JSLint every time I commit a JavaScript file. I'd rather have those in line in my editor. Okay, I'm going to spend some time writing some eLisp, which you probably shouldn't spend time doing. But you might decide you want to bite the bullet and write some code to help make your editing experience better, and it's going to make your job easier. So these are all internal tools. They're things that we decide to spend time on to make our lives easier. It's an investment. Even though this is something that a lot of you're gonna write these. You always do. You jump in and do it. But you might not necessarily be thinking of it as a big investment of your time. So okay, so we've talked about a lot of things that tools are. Okay, like what's not tools? Okay, so not tools is you've got a product and you've got a customer. You build your product to interact with your customer. That is your core product. That is what usually you expect that most of your time or most of your engineering time is spent working on this. Well, let's talk about all these other things that we're calling tools. Well, with the dev tool stuff, we're talking about how our developers build the product. So you've got the developers that are interacting with the product, and that requires a little greasing of the wheels and building tools to help them do that. Then we probably have product managers that are doing some stuff, and an odd arrow that turned into a bow tie next to the developers there. But that was supposed to be between developers and product managers. But they mostly communications-based stuff, kind of internal tools that help them communicate with the developers, look at the product, and they have some tools that they need too. Depending on the structure of your organization, you might have some sales and marketing, and they need ways of dealing with their customer. That's where Salesforce comes in really heavily in this area. You've got community and customer support. Again, depending on your business model, you might need to have some tools in this area. This is an area that Etsy spends a lot of time on. And then also, the legal team gets to join in the fun here too, because they always have to watch what's going on with customer support. They need a very unique set of tools. This is something that on the marketplace operations team at Etsy we deal with a lot. And then there's all sorts of other stuff. IT, recruiting, finance. These guys touch every area. So there's all this stuff that's going on around the product customer interaction that requires tools to be built to make it work better. Not necessarily all of it. It totally depends on what your needs are as a company, where your focuses are. Some of these things may be more crucial than others, but there's a lot going on beyond just the simple product customer interaction. Okay, fine. Like, we agree that we need tools. Okay, great. So we want to go from here to here. We want to go from a simple whisk, and we want a mixer, we want a blender. But do we really need all that? Do we really need, like, if I'm going to make cookies once a week, do I need a mixer? Or maybe the whisk is just fine. Maybe this is enough. Maybe the marketing team doesn't actually need to have a full reporting suite. They probably do, but maybe the marketing team only needs this one magical report, and then that does their job for them. So especially when you're a small company and you only have a few people and you don't have a lot of resources to investing in all your internal tooling, it's really important to focus on the minimum viable product. It's really important to think about, what do we really need to make the company better? What do we really need to set ourselves up for success? We really want to focus just on saving time for the really ongoing repetitive tasks, and really want to focus on improving quality of critical tasks. So by reducing the time spent on doing any one task, you're going to improve the quality of that task because you've standardized it by writing a script or creating an application. So only the most critical tasks and only the ongoing tasks. You really want to focus on return on investment, the minimum viable product for getting the most out of, for really making the biggest impact on whatever that area of your business you're trying to impact. I really like this picture. So I mean, focus on the problem. Focus on the minimum you need to do to get the job done. If you need a saw and you've got a tractor, then hook the tractor up to the saw and call it a day. You don't need to build a whole lumber yard because you need to cut a couple pieces of wood. And the other thing that's interesting about this is that it works because he has a tractor. So you have to be resourceful. You have to think about the things that you have in your business and the other tools that you're using. I mean, this is very much in line with the eat your own dog food mentality. You really want to try to find ways to reuse the same tools between different problems that you have and eat your own dog food. Reuse whatever you're building for your main product for your internal tools. And some of this might seem like it's stuff you've heard before, but it's really important to kind of remember how far-reaching this is through all of the things that you build every day. You also have control over your environment. So this is purely picture chosen because it's control over the environment. It doesn't really make much more sense beyond that. But yeah, so you have control over your environment. So internal tools, you're not building these things and sending them off into the world. You've got control over the people that are using this. You know what their day-to-day is like. You know how they're going to be using it. You don't have to worry about compatibility with IE6. You can do basically anything you need to do to make their process better. A good example of this is the way that Etsy does deploys. We've got a thing called Pushbot. Pushbot essentially manages who's in line to push code out the door. Pushbot operates in an IRC channel using the topic. So this is the push queue. And Pushbot has absolutely no persistence at all. It only uses the subject line. This is the persistence. And this says that I'm on production with Jim, and Zbob is waiting to do a config push, and then after Zbob, Mary, John, and Clyde are waiting to do their own push. And it's only using the topic. And it's because we trust our engineers, we know they're going to be on IRC, and we're utilizing the things that we already have in play. There's no need to build a lot of functionality over a queue on a web page that refreshes with some kind of a WebSockets connection and have built-in chat. No, we got this all in IRC. So just reuse this and call it a day. OK, so we've talked about some different ways of doing this. So the big question that we wanted to talk about is build or buy. So an IRC topic's not enough. We decided to bite the bullet. We need to build something. We need to build something big. So, OK, or we need something big. We need a main solution to this problem because this impacts our company. This impacts our business in a really fundamental way. So we need to either invest money in it or we need to build it ourselves. OK, let's go back to our diagram here. So instead of talking about this philosophically, we can talk a little bit about some of the examples at Etsy. I think that it'll kind of help give you some resources to think about how to approach your own problems. So at Etsy, and with most companies, this is a really, really important interaction. This is the stuff that Mike was talking about. This is stuff that a lot of organizations invest a lot of time in because it's really crucial to be able to get your product out the door. In most cases, this is somewhere that you're going to want to spend a lot of time. At Google, we have around, at Google, pardon me. At Etsy, we have around 100, we have over 100 developers, like around 120, I think. A big part of our engineering philosophy is just ship. I don't know if any of you guys have read the Code is Craft blog, but it talks about continuous deployment. We do continuous testing, and it really is we try to ship about 40 times a day. We're really focused on dev tools, and we have a team of, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 guys on the dev tools team that are building our tools for allowing us to just ship all the time and building us things like Pushbot. These are some other things that you really need as part of that interaction. You need Jira because it helps you keep track of the work that you need to do, or Trello if you're more of a fan of that. Deployinator, we also don't have a logo for Deployinator, so I just took the GitHub repo. But Deployinator is what we built to be able to allow us to do continuous deployment. This is the thing that's the big button that we press the button and it deploys the code out to all the servers. It deploys it out to staging and allows us to test on staging, and then we press it again and it goes out to production and it runs all of our unit tests. So that's something that's very integrated into our code base. It's very relevant to how our code works, how our code is structured. Whereas these things are not very tied to our structure, and I really don't want to build Jira. I don't want to build Trello. These are annoying problems that these guys have gone to great lengths to building tools for us. And no matter how much you hate Jira, it does its job pretty well for the job it's actually biting off. So you really don't want to try to build things that are really hard to build, and you want to focus on building things that are really tied into the way that your company works. Maybe this works for you, but probably not. Probably you're going to want to spend some time making it so you can, setting yourselves up so that you can actually get your code out the door as soon as you can into a sophisticated environment and not a single box with Memcache. So these are some of the tools that our dev tools team develops. Deployinator I talked really quickly about. StatsD, Mike was showing you some of the metrics that they collect over there at AppNexus. StatsD helps drive that at Etsy. It's basically just a framework that allows us to do timing calls with 95th percentile and different types of measurements with a single call in the code. So that way we kind of encourage, as part of a engineering practice, that we drop these StatsD calls in all over the place. Anywhere there's anything meaningful happening, you drop in a StatsD call and you immediately get a bunch of different views of that information. Testing infrastructure, we spend a lot of time on testing infrastructure so we can run all of our tests all at the same time every single time we push. Development environment, we spend a lot of time on trying to get a development database and having virtual machines that we can spin up and tear down really quickly and make it very scalable as we're hiring people constantly. Code sniffers, et cetera. You really want to maintain the quality of your code, so that's something the DevTools team is always attentive to, is coming up with whatever code sniffers or different ways that we can ensure the quality of our code continuously. Okay, so enough from the dev tools side of the house. This is something more that the marketplace operations team deals with, is the interaction between customer support and the customer. Now, we deal with basically all the non-engineering aspects of internal tools, but this is one of the areas that we spend a lot of time, so I think it's a really good way to illustrate when you really decide to bite off 4 months of engineering time and build an internal tool that your customer is never going to see, but is really going to pay for its weight. So right now is a product that they were actually recently acquired by Oracle. It's basically a email support system that we had. We had lots of gripes about it. It ran in a virtual machine. So it was really clunky, but that's fine. You have gripes about all sorts of things. But the real problem that we had was that we really needed, in order to be able to handle a bigger volume of messages from a bigger user base, we really needed to be able to have more information at our fingertips about our customer. What we're using right now, because it was a third-party tool, it didn't have information about who the members were. It didn't keep a good record between the messages with the member and the status of their account on Etsy. And so if we went back and we're looking at the status of their account on Etsy, we don't have a clear interface to see what our interaction with it is with them. So we decided to build Compass. This pixelated image is because I pulled it out of a thumbnail because we don't actually have a logo for it. But yeah, so we spent some time building something called Compass. And so I'm going to show you a few screenshots of Compass and talk about some features of it that illustrate the types of things that really justify spending a lot of time building your own internal tool. So this looks kind of like Gmail, you'd think. We've got some buckets on the side here that illustrate the different types of messages that we get from support or billing or French, German, troubleshooting, legal. So those are all different areas that we have different teams that actually man those buckets and they watch for incoming messages from people. You see at the top left there is the grab 10 emails button. That's kind of unique, not quite the same as what Gmail might have. I'll talk about that in just a second. Then over here we have a list of our members and some statuses and the time that they came in. So that's all still pretty usual Gmail style stuff. But the grab 10 emails is interesting. One of the things that this tool is built to allow you to do is treat your messages like a task. I mean, you might treat your own Gmail inbox this way, that, okay, when I get something, I leave it unread until I have something I need to do with regards to that email, and then I'll mark it unread or I'll archive it or something like that. But we really wanted to stress a workflow here where you have an email, you take action on it, and then you forget about it. Because that way you can really work through emails. So the grab 10 emails is really at the center of this, that if I'm going to sit down at my desk and I'm going to start answering emails, I'm going to grab 10, I'm going to work through those 10, and I'm going to grab 10 more. And I don't really care where they go to. I don't save them for follow-up later. It's just one and done, one and done, one and done. This is another really pivotal aspect to the way Compass works. So we're responding to a lot of emails, and these emails cover a lot of different areas of questions. Things from billing to how do I use the website to what is a browser. So we've got all these different questions coming in, and we want to answer all of them. And we want to answer all of them with the same level of detail and give them a lot, really detailed answers. And also, we want to be able to offer support through email or through Twitter or through the forums, through many different mediums. And also, if you look over here in the top right, we've also got languages. So we've got English, Dutch, French, or that, not Dutch, German. Is DE German? I think DE is German. So we got all these emails, all these different possible responses in different languages as well. So we built this thing called the knowledge base, which allows us to gather lots and lots of information about, not gather information, but to store lots of information about what we're going to be telling our users when they ask us questions. So now when we look at a specific interaction, you can see this is the history for this user for what my email interaction with them will be. And I was saying that we don't save things for later and come back to them. When this first email comes in, so when a first email comes in, we'll reply to it, it'll get closed out, we forget about it, and then they'll email us back with whatever the response is, and then it pops up back in the queue so that we can address it again. We have some notes in here so we can keep notes that we want to remember about our interaction with them, or say, oh, this user emailed us because they were confused about their interaction with this seller, and we suspect that this seller may have an inactive account, blah, 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 something like that. Whatever kind of notes we need. This is the member information. This is the reason why we want to have this build this tool ourselves and integrate it with our system, is we want all of this information available to us. I think that since this screenshot was taken, the number of headings here is probably doubled. As we release new features and people want new information surfaced, we keep on adding information to the sidebar here so that that's available to them as they're answering these emails. But a really interesting part here is this contact seller about order. So that's the knowledge base article. So when I sat down and I started, and I wanted to respond to this, I said, oh, KB article, I want to add this one because this makes sense for this response. Now, this is a flag that's on this email. So now, when I go back and I want to say, okay, I just answered emails for a week, or my team has been answering emails for a month or 6 months, we can go back and we can look at what these responses were. And we have incredibly fine-grained detail about what these interactions entailed. And it's customized to our business, the types of problems that we have, and it's tied to all of the same user data. So we have this very, very seamless access to data about what our interactions are with our members. These numbers are actually very low, and especially not impressive compared to Facebook scale. But this is actually after we released a big update to the help site, which brought down our email volume considerably. But we're answering a decent number of emails every week, and we've got about 40 admin answering these emails right now, and we have about 1,500 answers available. So in order to match these 1,500 answers to these 10,000 emails, it requires some tooling to help these admin do their work. And the main thing is that as we get more members, as Etsy grows, we don't want to have to keep on doubling the number of admin. We want to have the same number of people be able to satisfy just as many more customers as more customers start coming on board. So this is really, we're talking about scalability of a totally different kind here. We're talking about having the same number of, when you have a human interaction that has to happen, it's necessary that you have to have people that work for you working with your customers, or doing something where there's a relationship between the number of people between the volume of work that you're doing and the number of people you have on staff. It becomes a scalability problem. So in this situation, this is a really good example of scalability in that you've got technology that's designed to help people really be really productive. So you've got a human element and you've got a technology element. And that's really the intersection of internal tools, is when you've got something that you're trying to maximize the productivity of your human element. So that was kind of a whirlwind tour, like a bunch of different things that I had in my mind about how Etsy deals with internal tools and different things that are helpful to have in mind, especially when you're a small company and you're trying to think about, well, where should I be spending my time on building my own internal tools? So just to go back and talk about some of the main points that we talked about was be resourceful, the guy with the saw. You got to think about what you have available to you and try to use that before you start investing a lot of time and effort into building something much more grand. Processes, I think that we touched on this, but it's worth reiterating. Processes over technology. The process is so much more important than technology. Before you sit down and build something, go and talk to the person that's going to be using it and look at what they're doing. Look at how they're using whatever they're using now and try to figure out the way that you can do, not to be crude, but the minimum amount of work to help them do their job a little bit better. Don't try to build a grand solution that's going to allow them to work the least possible, but look at how you can use them and how you can integrate tools with their day-to-day work. The environment is a big part of it. I mean, like I said, you don't have to worry about supporting IE6. Make sure that you utilize your control over the environment. Return on investment, you want to focus on just the areas that are really going to give back to your business. And scalability, look at the areas of your business that are going to require more resources as your business grows, and see if you can find ways to mitigate that so you don't have to hire a ton of people every time you get a bigger user base. That's a really painful waste of money. So better to spend the time on the development now than on the manpower later.